This is East Midlands Today with Kylie Pentelow and me, Dominic Heel.
Our top story tonight, a police warning for power station protesters.
After a weekend of climate change clashes, it's not over yet.
There may be some people who've left the site thinking that they've got away with criminal acts, and they should be waiting for the knock on the door.
Also tonight,
Good evening, welcome to Monday's programme, live from the East Midlands.
Good evening. First tonight, they wanted to close down one of the biggest coal-fired power stations in Britain to highlight the threat from fossil fuels.
But the weekend of climate change protest at the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station ended in dozens of arrests, and today, a police warning that more arrests will follow.
A senior MP has accused the protesters of going to dangerous extremes. Here's our political editor, John Hess.
Can we get them in to support?
From the air, the moment that police and demonstrators clashed at the security fences of one of the country's largest coal-fired power stations. There were 57 arrests. Police will now be using such images to make more.
A group of people were coming here to close this power station, so it is concerning the level of violence that people will go to and the level of aggression that they will demonstrate.
This is no stroll through the woods. Over 1,000 climate change campaigners besieged the power station. A police operation at an estimated cost of £500,000 attempted to stop them breaking in.
If there's one way to get people riled up, it's to cram them into a confined space. So I would imagine that that's probably their intention, to be honest.
We support a lawful, peaceful protest, but we don't want to see scenes of the violence, of the intimidation that ourselves and the police faced at the weekend.
Today, the full extent of damage to Ratcliffe's security fencing by some of the more determined protesters was revealed, angering leading politicians.
They've taken a perfectly sensible campaigning point to absurd and dangerous extremes. It's one thing to say that something should be done to reduce the level of carbon emissions. It's quite another to start an organised punch-up with the police, trying to get into a power station and close down the supply of electricity to millions of people.
It is right to allow people to protest democratically and peacefully. If they go further and try and disrupt power supplies, that would go too far.
The demonstrators say they're not giving up and will return. If in a future demonstration the power station was forced to close down, the worry for the generators and for our politicians is whether thousands of homes across the region can rely on their electricity supply. John Hess, East Midlands Today in South Nottinghamshire.
Well, our social affairs correspondent Jeremy Ball has joined us in the studio. So it's over, Jeremy, but what's happened to the protesters who were arrested?
Well, Dominic, they've all been released, but already tonight more than 50 people facing criminal charges for things like aggravated trespass, criminal damage, obstructing the police. Now, these are people from all over the country who are going to have to report to the police in Nottingham in a few weeks' time. Until then, they've got bail conditions which prevent them from approaching any power station anywhere in the UK.
People do have the right to protest against things like climate change, don't they?
They do, and you'll probably remember all the fuss after the policing of the G20 protests in London. And then, of course, a big row in Nottingham earlier this year after scores of people were arrested as they prepared a power station protest. Now, this time the police did things slightly differently. They made it very clear that people who turned up at the power station to protest peacefully would be allowed to do that. And they say they only intervened when a relatively small number of people actually tried to break in.
It's probably hard to judge, but did the protesters actually achieve very much in the end?
Well, I think they were never realistically going to achieve their stated aim of getting inside to close the power station down. Realistically, perhaps this was more about raising public awareness, and they did get a lot of headlines this weekend. The problem is those headlines tended to be about violence and about a small number of injuries and not about the issue of climate change.
Yep. Jeremy, thanks very much.